So the most common breaches that we're seeing right now are all related to not keeping your systems up. If you looked at either Anthem or Community Health, things like that, a lot of them were attributed to either the Heartbleed bug, which had a patch out, but they weren't maintaining their systems and keeping the patches up to date. So that one's probably pretty critical, trying to make sure that you're keeping your systems to the full patch levels that are recommended by all the security groups out there. Another one was doing all the small programs that go with them. A lot of people patch their systems, but they'll only patch the operating system and think they're doing a good job. The Anthem, part of it was an Adobe one. And so patching Adobe and patching all the little applications that you have, most people don't do that. They don't come back and validate that all the little programs that are being used are being kept up to date. So that's probably the biggest thing that people can look at from that point of view. The OCR started requiring people to do NIST-based risk assessments. So if you look at how NIST works, it is very complete and thorough in how they go about it. It actually gives you a full cycle. So you have to go through a process of identifying all the systems that are involved, not only the physical system, but where the data is. So you have to map them out and map out the flow of data from the start to the finish. If you map it out, now at least you have a comprehensive idea of where to look. Once you get that down, now you have to come out and identify all the possible things that can go wrong. So if you're using that NIST-based process, they give you a list of hundreds of items that you're supposed to compare against the system that you have and all the possible ways it could go wrong. So you come up with a gap assessment that you're going to try and fill out and prioritize them based on likelihood. So at the end of it all, you end up with a list that says, these are the possible things that can go wrong. Here's the possible ways to fix them, presenting that to senior management and saying, here's where I need money. If I don't have the money, you have to accept the risk. So now it's on you, senior management. So do you feel comfortable accepting that risk? So as a way of getting funding for what you need to do, that's probably one of the easiest ways to do it. Make sure it's in your assessment and that you've actually communicated it appropriately to management at that point in time. Well, responsibility actually lies ultimately with the board of directors. The board of directors is responsible for everything that goes on. Execution-wise, it's going to be the security officer or the risk officer. So in my case, risk is part of what we do for the security group at HealthPort. So we've got that aspect, and we present it to senior management, and they communicate the aspects that they need up to the board for approval. The first thing they should expect is that you have a comprehensive security program in place. And not only do you have it in place, but you communicate it effectively to all the people that are going to use it. So we publish it out to all of our employees, all of our members, let them know that they're going to be able to count on us to have it in place. So the members ask us questions. They say, here's your sheet, fill this out. Do you have policies in place? Do you validate this with your vendors? Do you validate that all of your employees are aware of this? So you have sign off and everything. So we have to show that to all of our members so that they're comfortable with what's happening at that point. And any other company should be able to ask for that from their vendor at the same time. They should also be able to have transparency in things like the risk assessment. Part of the risk assessment should be a penetration test. You should be able to ask your vendor for a copy of the summary of the penetration test. They may not give you the full details. There's a lot of data that goes into it, but the summary of what's going on so that you can validate it's being done and have an action plan and being followed through to completion. If you can't get that confidence from your vendor, then you probably need to look someplace else so that you know that all the appropriate actions being taken and followed through to completion. for securing your offshore vendors, there's things you can do that will help that. The first one is to make sure that you have a technical platform that's designed to support that. So in HealthPort's case, we don't offshore our production line, but we offshore some of our development. And in that case, we give them what they call a VDI. It's a virtual desktop environment. Inside of that desktop environment, we allow the developer to have access and he can see things, but he can't copy any information back to his source area. So even though he's working overseas, the data stays within the US. So it's not allowed to transport any place. They're not allowed to print it. They're not allowed to make copies of it. The environment around it, we make sure that they have controls that are appropriate for that area. If they walk into that space, they're not allowed to carry cameras in where the environment is. They're not allowed to print paper. So any paper that's written for taking notes, they have to shred that in that environment. So we make sure that anything that does happen there, it's the person that's there, but everything else stays here with the US. I think in those cases, there's a change in the environment. So if you go back a few years, the normal thought in healthcare was we're not being targeted. We've got data, but the data is not valuable at that point in time. It's not government entities or these large-scale institutions that are trying to attack you. It's the common person. It's the person who picks up a script and tries to run a script against you. So if you're keeping your systems up, then that's all you really have to do, right? You stop at that point. Now, the change that's been happening is, so Anthem or Community Health, those have been traced back to the Chinese. Now you're getting government attacks coming in. Now you're to the level of what the financial institutions have had to deal with or the government's had to deal with. So this is a new step for the healthcare environment. They're going to have to step up their game and make sure they're maintaining their systems to a higher degree than they used to, because it's not just that script kiddie that's going to be running something that he found on the internet and seeing if he can get in. Now it's an actual advanced threat. They're trying things that haven't been tried before. Since it's brand new, you have to have more awareness of what's going on and expect something to come in the first door. You have to catch it and stop it at that point rather than waiting for it to be deep into the environment. So Anthem and Community Health were both very long-term penetrations. They were in the environment for months before they ever found them. So we should be able to detect anomalies in the environment of behavior in addition to just maintaining the systems that way. So some of the things we do are, we don't just count on a level of encryption like running, a lot of people run Symantec, which encrypts a single disk. We run network-based encryption, so it's hardware that sits on the network, and every piece of data that goes through that now is encrypted and saved on the disk. So even if that person came out and got to the disk, they can't read anything on there because it wasn't accessed in the appropriate manner and it wasn't accessed by an authorized account that could be able to see that. Some of the other things are actually separation of the environments. Your production environment should be completely isolated from any test environment. Community Health, it was a test server, I believe, that was put online, and they attacked and came in through this test server. Well, you have to keep that environment isolated off, so if they capture something that's not as restrictive as the production environment, that they can't bridge those environments and steal the data that way. So a lot of that's going to become, with these advanced techniques now, you're going to be looking for ways of hardening that environment to prevent those from happening.